Welcome to UK Business Show, UK's premier business show where we feature business thought leaders, high achievers, and industry experts. Today's episode is brought to you by World Outsourcing Solutions Limited, a company that specializes in helping executive business owners with virtual assistant services and business growth systems. Here's your host.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us today. My guest with me for this episode is David Schein. Now, David's an attorney, a consultant, an author, and a speaker, and he helps business owners build inclusive businesses and advises on HR and legal issues as well. He's the president of the Claremont Management Group and also a political and business commentator. He's written a couple of books as well, The Decline of America, 100 Years of Leadership Failures, and his newest book, more recently published, is called Bad Deal for America. Now, there's lots of positives we can take from that, so don't get put off just by those two titles here. He's with us to share some of his leadership insight, which he's gleaned over 35 or more years within business. So it's great to have the opportunity to chat with you. Welcome, David Schein.
Thank you, Trevor. I really appreciate that kind introduction, and very happy to have a chance to share some thoughts with you and your audience.
Sounds really good. Yeah. So maybe just to start with, share a little bit about your journey that's brought you through those 35 years of experience, some of the insights that you've seen as well, but just how have you sort of navigated business life? Well,
I came from, as I call it, the wrong side of the tracks. I grew up in a large family, oldest of 7 children. We didn't have a lot of money. Neither of my parents had attended college. My dad actually attended college after he retired from the military, but he was an enlisted man, career enlisted man in the military, which does not pay well, doesn't do well to support 7 children. But he and my mom showed us hard work and dedication. They both really emphasized academics and going to college. And I won a full scholarship to 2 major universities. I accepted the scholarship from University of Pennsylvania, which, part of the Ivy League. So that was kind of an interesting opportunity. I was kind of a duck out of water because I had never even been on a college campus or had not even been to the Penn campus. And then there I was, a student. So I had some very interesting adventures there. I actually I became a radio commentator on public radio and had a weekly 1-hour program on the art scene in Philadelphia. And that grew into a business where I began to represent artists and folk singers and rock bands. And I then was offered an opportunity to attend a full-time major MBA program. And so I closed the business and went to University of Virginia, got an MBA, and then moved after that to Houston, Texas, and attended law school. And did 10 years with major oil companies focused on employment matters. And then about a dozen years in private practice as an attorney. And then I did a rather abrupt change in life. Is I went back to the University of Virginia and got my PhD, and then recruited for full-time faculty positions. And part of my story, and one reason I'm sensitive to discrimination issues, is it took me over 2 years to get a full-time appointment, and it was not a tenure track but a visiting appointment, because most universities are looking for newly minted PhDs, meaning mid-30s or so max. And here I was in my mid-50s recruiting for an academic position. So I have managed to get past that point. I did a 1-year visiting gig and then a 3-year gig at another university. And then I have now been at the University of St. Thomas for 9 years. It's 9 years this month. And I'm an endowed chair at the university with full tenure. But it was interesting for me because as someone in my early career who worked with employment discrimination and different issues like that, it was interesting to be on, you might say, the other side of the table as someone recruiting to be a faculty member. But there are a lot of challenges in the workforce. Not every, And I think it's unfortunate because I think there's a lot of value out there that sometimes employers are missing because they're not attracting the right workforce or getting the right people in there.
Yeah, absolutely. Be really good to dig into the inclusive side of things, building an inclusive culture and that shortly, but kind of quite curious as well. But your first book, so you didn't write it to just complain about presidents and all that sort of stuff. But from a sort of a non-political perspective, there's lots of different things that we can learn from people in those sort of positions. And it's in some ways, we can learn a lot more from the mistakes sometimes than the successes, partly because we maybe pay attention to them a bit more as well. But what would you say for business owners listening? Maybe they're not running countries yet, maybe they are. But whatever level we're all at, what would be some of the kind of obvious, if you like, or key mistakes that you've recognized through studying the different presidents, and how can we avoid those so that we don't make them when they're related to building businesses and things like that?
Well, in Decline America, 100 Years of Leadership Failures, there were two reasons that I wrote the book. One of them is my concern about the national debt, which when the book was released on President's Day 2018, was around $23 trillion. Famously, the national debt is hovering around $30 trillion today. So the situation has definitely not gotten better. Yeah. The second one was the misplaced adoration of Franklin Roosevelt, who is kind of in a critical turning point in the American empire. And one of the concepts of the book was to look at the rise and fall of the Roman Empire, of course, a very famous historical book. And so that's part of where the title came from. And I look at the American presidents during the American Empire, which begins basically with Woodrow Wilson in the end of World War I, when America had truly established itself as a world power. And then from there through President Obama, the book ends with Obama. So we're looking at a sequel, if you will, that will cover, will add on Trump and Biden and maybe add some different material to the earlier chapters. But one of the things that we really focused on was management and ethics. So those were the, management, you could say, leadership / management of the American government. And then were these people ethical? And I look at ethics in two ways. I look at ethics in terms of them as a human being. How did they live their personal lives? And ethics in terms of the way they conducted the business of the United States. For instance, despite the adoration of Franklin Roosevelt, he did not agree to desegregate the military. He also did not fully agree to make employment during World War II equal. The something that's little covered is that the Black community in the United States came to President Roosevelt and said, hey, you've put in this government control in order to produce goods for war. And we want to make sure that Black Americans are given an equal opportunity to work in those positions and get the training to create these technical jobs. And of course, during World War II, we created the atomic bomb, as they called it. We call it nukes today. And we also came up with sonar and radar, and a lot of the groundwork for current inventions, if you will, came from World War II. But Roosevelt was very resistant to that, which was interesting. And like I said, he never did desegregate the military. So the United States fought World War I and World War II with a segregated military. By the way, Harry Truman, who is the highest rated president in my book, and not with a high grade, but just a higher grade than his colleagues, was the person who desegregated the United States military. And, my reaction is that was long overdue. So that was the focus, leadership and ethics. The book is I can't say it's nonpartisan per se, but it's certainly bipartisan. I've been criticized by, usually if people criticize the book, it's because they don't like the grade I gave to a particular president. And so a couple of commentators have said, well, you gave a low grade to Bill Clinton and you gave a low grade to Barack Obama. And I said, well, first of all, Harry Truman's a Democrat. He got the highest grade in the book. Secondly, George W. Bush also got a low grade along with Clinton and Obama, as we see the United States on this kind of, unfortunately, it was a slow curve downward. It's now kind of a rapid curve downward. I am interesting part about that is to address one of your points is I'm a very optimistic person. I mean, I work 7 days a week. I love what I do. I'm working on a lot of different projects and things. I do think that we can turn around and extend the American empire, but we're going to need to do that a lot better than we are doing it.
Okay. Yeah. No, it makes a lot of sense. So would you say in some ways not getting the right balance from an inclusivity, a diversity perspective within their leadership teams, has that carried through the different presidencies?
Well, I think we're probably late to the game with a female president. Of course, you've had Margaret Thatcher, who's one of my personal favorites, and was a contemporary with Ronald Reagan, who's very, very popular with many of the American people and with the conservative side. I am ironically not as big a fan of Reagan as some other people, because he didn't control the national debt. And to me, what we're doing is the cliche here in the United States is kicking the can down the road. And I think we've kicked it to, it'll be our great-grandchildren's great-grandchildren, and we'll still be dealing with this. I mean, it is an enormous amount of burden that we're leaving for later generations. So I do think that Israel has had a female leader. I think it's time for the United States to show a little diversity. I don't disagree with having a person of other races in the White House. I just didn't think that Barack Obama was particularly accomplished or particularly that right politician. And that's the other thing that I think we need to avoid is that just as we shouldn't appoint people to office or elect people because they're white, we shouldn't elect people or appoint people to business or office who have some other characteristic. So I wouldn't say I'd vote for anybody running for a female running for president, but I would love to see a very highly qualified female run for the United States presidency, and would certainly support them. So I mean, again, we need to focus on the deliverables, and a lot of criticism today in the United States of the push to DEI, as it's called, diversity, equity, and inclusion, is that a lot of it is not based on qualifications. And when people ask me, well, how do you see fixing some of America's social problems? I say, we need to get back to kindergarten and first grade and third grade, and we really need to focus on the 3 R's. Even though I teach at a university business school, I am a huge fan of STEM, STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. And the United States is continually falling behind other major countries in terms of producing its share of STEM graduates. And we need to start where people in very young understand basics, and we don't need to teach them various social concepts, and they don't understand sex. I'm not sure why we're talking about sex and gender to little kids, but we need to focus on really important things, which is they need to be able arithmetic. They need to be able to write sentences. And one of the things that I'm seeing as a professor, and I've taught at, I was an adjunct at several schools before I got a full-time position, is that the art of writing, just writing a paper, writing a paragraph, is not universal in the United States. We may be allegedly an English-speaking country, but in terms of what we colloquially are referred to as the Queen's English, by the way, is Americans are sadly lacking. And of course, we've now moved away from teaching our children cursive, and I'm not quite sure how that's going to transition, but we definitely got to get down to some real basic things like paying our bills and things like that.
Yeah. So what would you say for people that are listening thinking, I know I need to try and address the whole inclusivity, diversity issue. I want to get the balance right within the business that I run, within the teams that I lead. I don't, as you say, you don't want to pick an individual just because they fit a certain profile. They need to be qualified. They need to be competent what you're asking them to do. But how do you help business leaders navigate finding the people, getting the right balance? What are the things they need to think about to try and sort of build an effective team so that you can do what they need them to do without getting too caught in the weeds, if that's the right phrase, of trying to balance and satisfy lots of different voices?
Well, I think, first of all, you need to attract people to your workplace because you have a great workplace. And while I work on the management side, which means sometimes I'm the person who signs off on people being terminated, and at the same time, I will comment that many people who don't make it in a particular job are simply not bad people. They are a bad fit for the position for which they've been hired, or they fail to grow into the position. And again, part of that relates back to our education system, but it also dates back to, or relates back to our workplace culture, is that we've got to have a decent place to work. And an accepting, decent place to work. We don't have to say, oh, well, we're getting out there, we're going to be DEI and all that. It's called, we're going to hire the best people, and we're going to let our community know that regardless of your color or your sexual preferences, be it at home or whatever it is, that doesn't matter. And I've been through some pretty interesting things because I've been doing this a long time. For instance, during the HIV crisis, which ran from the late 80s into the 90s, and today is considered, interestingly, largely a non-event today, but it was a big deal in the time period I mentioned. And I would have business owners come to me and say, well, I don't want to hire any gay people because I don't want to get HIV. And I said, I'm going to say something, we may get censored on this. I said, if you don't have sex with that employee, you're very unlikely to get AIDS. I said, it's not easy to get. It's spread through sexual contact and sharing drug needles. I said, I know you pretty well. I don't think you're in either one of those categories. So if that person shows up for work every day, gets the job done, what do you care? Hire the right person. And so, I went through that period. And again, that's tended to settle down. And one of the problems that we have run into is in traditional male industries, we've had a lot of difficulty getting women in. And when we were talking earlier, I mentioned about the drilling industry. Houston, Texas is in the neighboring state of Louisiana, where a lot of drilling is done off in the Gulf of Mexico. And so what would happen is that we've been trying to get women to work in these well-paid jobs on the drilling rigs. And I said, here's the problem. If you have one woman on each shift, and it's a tough job, and they go out for 2 weeks at a time on the rigs, I said, they're going to be all by themselves. They're going to be subject to harassment, not because we're not trying to protect them, but because, people are people.
Yeah.
And I said, what you need to do is, if you've got 4 women in the loop that are in the same category, send them all out at the same time, so that they have colleagues, so that they have people that the other women that they can associate with and not feel so alone. And what triggered that was interesting, because that goes back quite a while. Is it was a little news clip that I caught in the last week, talking about encouraging women to be over-the-road truck drivers. A well-publicized statistic in the United States is that we will need, in the United States, 150,000 over-the-road truck drivers over the next 10 years due to retirements. And they did a special on getting women to drive these big rigs. And I think that's just absolutely super. And unlike the drilling rig example, they just need to be in that cab. They don't have to worry about, if they're dealing with a lot of guys, maybe at the truck stops and stuff.
Okay, yep. So that's a really good example with the ladies and the trucks. What would you say will be some of the other things that business owners can think about that you've seen worked to help sort of balance the diversity, the inclusion within their teams and businesses more?
Well, I think, first of all, do broad-based recruiting and hiring. One of the things is that a lot of companies end up hiring by referral. So they tend to say, oh, well, Jimmy's worked out well and he wants his brother or his nephew or his next door neighbor. And what happens is you tend to recreate the workforce that you already have. And so the important thing is to have it. In order to have a diverse workforce, you've got to get out there and work on it. And that does take some doing. If you're recruiting broadly, in the United States, in the Public Employment Commission, virtually every location in the United States, a city like Houston has multiple offices of public employment. I do recommend that people list their openings with the Public Employment Service. And I know it seems very obvious. Online recruiting may be fine, but some people, especially people of color in lower level jobs, may not really be that focused on doing online recruiting versus the old paper and pen at the front desk of different businesses. But the unemployment office I think can help add to that, more community representative of the community. In terms of executive hiring, certainly as my university is a Hispanic serving institution. We have about 40 to 50% of our undergraduate students are Hispanic. Someone wanted to increase their Hispanic representation, they could recruit at a school like mine. We have about over 100 historically Black colleges in the United States. Someone wants to take a look there. So there's a lot of different ways to do that. There are big employment fairs that a lot of different organizations sponsor, and to get out there and do it. But again, for small organizations, I think the Public Employment Service is a very good place to start, and certainly online. And also, again, part of the experience is that when people come to your business to recruit, to be recruited, that they really feel that they're welcome there, that it's a business that they could function in. And so that's a kind of a learned behavior, is to, basically, be nice. I mean, be a place that people really want to show up for work at.
Yeah. No, it's really good. I think there's a lot of elements involved, isn't there? I mean, some of it can be, I'm thinking of the analogy of a football team. So over here, the UK, or soccer, as you call it over there, like, you can have lots of world-class players, but if the culture in the dressing room is not as it should be to bring out the best of those players, then they're not going to perform at their best. They're not going to stay, are they? And it's a similar picture from what you're saying as well. It's like, we need to have workplaces environments that people feel accepted for who they are. The fact that, you know, they come from a different area, they have different perspectives on things, at different age groups, different genders, whatever the label, if you want to use that phrase. I'm not sure if that's as appropriate as it could be, but I mean it well. Whatever makes somebody different from the next person on the team, really, it's accepting, isn't it, them for who they are, valuing them as an individual. You're right. It's also a key point, I think, that you made is a really good one to just remind the listeners here. It's like, you have to be aware that where you think the people you're trying to reach are looking might not actually be where they're looking. For one reason or another, they might be excluded, or just they're not confident in using that avenue of finding a role or approaching an organization, whatever it might be. I think that's a key point. In lots of ways, we translate that from a marketing perspective of, we will naturally go where our clients or our potential clients would be, so that we'll find them. But I think it's so easy to miss the side of that from the recruitment aspect. So it's really good that you brought that up. Really useful. All good stuff. Really enjoying this. I know there's lots of different kind of factors that we could chat and talk about more. What you've shared has been really good. Maybe if we just had one more kind of element to a strategy for a good, healthy workforce that is sort of representative of different cultures or genders or whatever. What other thing would you suggest that you've seen works well, or something specifically that hasn't worked well that we can avoid making the same mistakes?
Well, as I mentioned, sometimes if you have a fairly remote workplace and you're trying to increase women or minority representation, sometimes having people spread out doesn't work as well. So if you only have a few minority or a few female in a remote workplace, put them on the same shifts, have them so that they have some people of their color or their gender that they feel a little bit more comfortable. But I think a lot of this comes back to what you said, and my understanding is Manchester United is the most valuable sports franchise in the entire world. And, they're not always going to have fabulous stars, but they've got a great team. And I think people tend to feel, and it's interesting because there's a big debate in the United States today. Do people come to work for pay? Why do people stay at work? And a lot of it deals with the opportunity for development and advancement. So a company that really focuses on its people and gives them advancement opportunities is favored over a higher paying company that just says, look, just shut up, do your job, here's your money. And so there are some statistical bases for saying that this is a better way of doing things. And I know in my early corporate career, I was with Shell Oil Company, and Shell made quite an investment in me. They did have me participate in some external training programs and some internal training programs, and I learned a great deal. I also, in those programs, they were done in groups. It gave me a chance to associate with other people that work for the company. So there's certainly making that investment, I think, is a very good idea.
Yeah, absolutely. It's partly using the resources within the companies that you have, isn't it? Like, if you have different departments, can you create interrelated activities that brings departments together, either for a social side of thing or working on a specific project or something like that? Getting people together and talk about from that perspective is good. Yeah. I think also one of the key challenges can be the mindset of kind of the business owner that, yes, change is needed and you're going to have to do something different if you're not attracting the right type of employee. And it's embracing that reality, I suppose, rather than avoiding it or putting a head in the sand or whatever. And it's just like, actually start thinking about, what is it that we're doing that's not working, that we need to change, and look at maybe some other companies that have got a more successful culture, something like that that's more diverse. They're utilizing the perspectives that different people bring. All those things are important, aren't they, as to how you're going to actually progress things going forward from where you are to where you want to get to as a business to be more successful.
Absolutely.
It's really good. I've really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you for sharing your insights. We are out of time for now, but there's lots more I know we could chat about just on a few of the topics that we've touched on. We could dig deeper, which is always a nice place to be in some ways.
Absolutely.
I know from a consultancy perspective, you operate more domestically. So within the US, if people are listening and you're in the US or you have business endeavors in the US, teams, whatever, then definitely reach out and have a chat with David. Where would be the best place for people to touch base with you? Website?
We have a corporate website, World Wide Web, ClaremontManagementGroup.com. And in terms of the 2 books that I have out, they are, of course, on Amazon, and on the other side of the pond, you can get them as audio. Well, you can get them as ebooks, and we are working on an audio book, hopefully to release this summer for the new book, Bad Deal for America. And we're going to have that performed rather than simply read.
Okay, sounds interesting. Yeah, absolutely. That's good. That's thinking outside the box as well. I like that. Yeah, no, it's really good. So for everybody listening, if you can't reach out to David to work collaboratively through the US means, then grab the book. There's lots of insights that he shares through either of the books, depending what you want to learn next. Just get some perspective from somebody that's got over 35 years experience within business and within the advisory perspective on getting the balance right with people, with culture, and how to lead a business well. Lots of things you can learn from David that we haven't been able to touch on today, but it's really good. Thanks again, David, for your time. Appreciate you being on this episode. It's been a joy to chat with you.
And the same here, and thank you so much for your time and interest, and we really appreciate it.
No, it's brilliant. It really is. And for everybody listening, take one thing that we've chatted about today that's resonating with you, or that's kind of irked you to the point where you think, actually, yeah, I need to address that a bit more. What part of your current recruitment strategy can you tweak? Can you improve to make your workforce, your teams more diverse? Because you'll get the benefits from different perspectives, from a bigger, wider perspective than just recruiting the same type of people that you currently have, if maybe the skill set is not where it needs to be. Lots of things to think about. So find out what you need to change, or just to improve slightly and think about more, and you'll be more successful with it, I'm sure. So with all that said, we will wrap this episode up. Just remember that we believe in you and we believe in your potential. We will catch you next time.
Thank you for listening to UKAI Business Show. We will be back to bring you more episodes with success stories and advice straight from the experts. Want more? Check out www.ukaibusinessshow.com. Get your free trial of our virtual assistant service today. Just visit www.worldoutsourcingsolutions.com. Quote WOS18, or send us an email at support@worldoutsourcingsolutions.com.